So please get seated in the back. Please, let's get started with the session. Everybody get seated and eyes this way, please. Great, thank you. My name is Ari Asmi. I'm from the Research Data Alliance, and today we are talking, this session is about global activities and how to connect EOSC with global players. We have an interesting panel and one presentation. Before that one, I want to show some basic logistics slides and short introduction. So could we get the Slido slide at least on? So please remember during this session, I tried to put on some of the slides also, this code if you have forgotten that. One way to submit questions, and of course for the online, the only way to submit questions is through the Slido, and we are trying to follow this. And we have a panel discussion. Of course, you always prepare questions beforehand, but I would actually prefer to have audience questions. So if you have any, please feel free to do so. So let's get on the introductory slides, please. Can you put them on? Okay. Okay. Still not happening. Yes. Okay. I choose this picture to start because this got me a little bit of feeling when you have been here for the now a day in EOSC session here. This is of course a copy of originally this art piece was made from New York, but I tried to find one from Madrid, but I couldn't, or even Brussels, so I kind of choose between the best selection in case of Paris, meaning that, I mean, you get always the feeling that you are in the center and everything what is happening around you is the most important things. And then the things across the farther away you go from where you are, the less interesting they are. And I mean, I'm not saying that we are doing it intentionally, but it is really a pragmatic way of developing things, but it's good to know that other people also view perhaps the world a similar way from their perspective. Unfortunately, science doesn't work that way, and I mean, it's this kind of old sayings, how science is always global, but this comes very clear when you look, for example, papers on COVID situation, that how much of the research activity has to translate between countries, how much the research products, the data, and the services have to work across all the areas of the world. And so the research world is global, but of course the infrastructures where we work, because of their funding and their structure, are usually regional or local. So for that purpose, it's sometimes good to change the perspective a little bit and not look directly from the European perspective. This was maybe the most twisted word map I could find, in some sense. But it also shows that when you're thinking every time that EOSC is in the center, for a lot of humanity, EOSC is on the right-hand side, almost out of the picture. And so it's good to discuss also with the other communities around the world and try to figure out what should we do. We have a panelist coming later on. I will show more information about them later. But before that one, we can look on the other side of the world, at least in this map. We have a presentation from Lautaro Matos, who is the Executive and Technical Director at La Referencia, which is part of Latin America. And he presents the activities, what their research infrastructures on a somewhat similar approach what EOSC does do in their country. So let's hope that this works, because this is a remote presentation and it's always a little bit questionable, but can we try to get the presentation to work through the Zoom, please? Okay, and then can we get the sound? Okay, no sound yet. Okay, let's, is your mic on?
Yes, yes.
Okay, now, perfect, please.
Oh, thank you, Ari. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the organizer. I must say that EOSC is an inspiration for us. We are trying to do our best in our side, but it's a far for us to be in the place of EOSC in our region. So I will be presenting our network, which is La Referencia, the Latin American Open Science Repository Network. It's a network formed by the Association of Governments. You know that we don't have an European Union. We need to build that by agreement. So we did that in more than 10 years ago as a result of a project funded by the ADB Bank. That was led by Red Clara, which is our research and education network, our regional research and education network. At that time, the mission of the project and the later cooperation agreement was to give visibility to the public funded scientific production, especially the production deposited in the repositories. So through this cooperation, we created a federated network of institutional and data repositories based on this agreement. So we have 12 countries now, 11 from Latin America, and Spain is also part as an external associate country, because the tradition of collaboration, you said that, Ari said that the science is global. Of course, in Latin America, we have a strong tradition of collaboration with the Spanish because the language and the cultural relations. So Spain is now part of our network also. And those 12 national nodes are formed mainly from the national authorities of science and technology. So I will bring three aspects that we think that are important of our network. The first one is that we are a political forum for discussions around open science policies. We have this table with authorities of the governments, and we try to develop agreements and common policies and make some harmonization around open science. Again, we don't have nothing above like the European Union to force us to collaborate. So La Referencia works as a glue between the countries around the open science policies. The second one is this mission of give visibility to the production. We do that by building national nodes that aggregates the contents from the repositories and different systems from the institutions, from the research institutions. So we build these national nodes, national aggregator, national portals, and those portals are harvested by our regional aggregators that at the same time interoperates with the global infrastructure such OpenAir, Core, Base, and other global aggregators. So the visibility of the metadata at the end of the day of the contents of the repositories works through this federated network. And we did all that by developing our own open platform. We have now 8 years of collaborative development from La Referencia teams with the countries. This is an integral solution that works as an infrastructure for the national nodes, for the regional nodes, and it's also being used by other countries like Portugal, and we have agreements to use that in Africa. There is already an African Portuguese mixed between Brazil, Portugal, and Portuguese African countries. They are using our software for the portal and aggregation software. And we are currently always developing new features and integration with different kind of service like trade systems and other open science systems. So I want to show our collaboration networks. This is the group of some of the institutions that collaborates with us, because La Referencia is funded on collaboration mainly. So in yellow, you will see the countries, and all the institutions are at regional level, in the Latin American, the Caribbean level. But from the very beginning, we do collaborate with global and European and other regional initiatives. For us was from the beginning very important, the collaboration with CORE, the Open Access Repository Association, which is global. With Open Air, we've been part of the Open Air project, from 2 different Open Air projects, and as a result, we are providing our contents to the Open Air collection. So we are also part of the UNESCO efforts around the UNESCO recommendations, and we have different agreements with African networks, MOUs with different institutions around the open science systems and infrastructures. And especially we are working with the Research Data Alliance for bringing contents to our language, for making possible for our researchers and community to access to the different contents and result of the Research Data Alliance groups. So I will talk more on that in a moment. So at regional level, there are very important and pioneer initiatives like Cielo, like Redalic and Latindex, based more in the journals, the diamond journals in the case of Redalic, and we have collaboration agreement with them. Our main objective is to bring the contents of the diamond journals and other systems into the repositories, because we want to bring all that contents for us. It's important to populate the repositories with all the scientific production of the institution. So that kind of collaborations and interoperability mechanisms are important for us to build our strong network for our contents. As I said, we are actively collaborating with UNESCO around the UNESCO recommendations. We are working with our regional office and Paris office also by designing a methodology for diagnosing and monitoring how the UNESCO recommendations are being implemented in our countries, and we are expecting soon to give some results about that. Again, the UNESCO recommendations are important for some governments to learn and push for some open science policies to be implemented in the near future. I want to mention this document because it's important for us. Red Clara is our mother institutions. It was the institution that in charge of the original project, but they are still related with La Referencia, and they work on the connectivity between Europe and Latin America, between Africa and Latin America. There are projects running, and this document was written with the idea of to give information about the different kind of collaborations in terms of connectivity, infrastructures, but also contents around open science in Latin America. So please take a look to this document later. Another important development of this year was this European Commission report about the open access policies in Latin America. This report that was in charge of Pilar Rico and Laura Bonora, it's an excellent diagnose and recommendation document for open science policies in our region, but also in relation with the European Union, with common objectives, and that's this also a recommendation for you to read if you want to know more that I will tell in these short minutes. As I said, the collaboration with the RDA is very important for us because we're trying to change the culture, the research cultures, in favor of opening the data, sharing the data, the research data. The challenge there is especially to bring different kind of results from the RDA groups that usually are in English, and that could be a barrier for our region. So we are putting effort in translating or interpreting different webinars and bring people to speak and give training courses about research data management in our region. Another important collaboration that is helping us to develop some infrastructure in our region is the SCOS funding cycle. We are part now of this SCOS funding circle from the last year, and we are collecting funding for developing a very specific projects around usage statistics, but also one big challenge that we have in our regions in terms of infrastructure, that there are persistent identifiers. In our region, according to a recent study about the metadata, only the 20% of our metadata actually has persistent identifiers. So we're working on a project funded partially with the funding of SCOS, but also with the Brazilian Institute of Science and Technology. And this project is trying to build a decentralized infrastructure for our countries in order to store and resolve and assign persistent identifiers based in the ARC identifiers to our community. We want to build a more sustainable service. Most of the time, the payments in dollars are a barrier for our institutions. So we need to develop local infrastructures, decentralized one, because we want to be reliable and not rely only in one institution, but in a network. So this project is very important for us, and we are expecting to publish the results, the final results, the next year. So to finalize my presentation, I want to bring some of the challenges of our regions in terms of open science. Again, for us to create common or at least compatible legal frameworks between the countries is very important. It's not easy to do that. There are very different visions between the countries, and it's not easy to negotiate and create legal frameworks. The legal frameworks and changes in the research assessment in the agencies are the way to move the incentives in favor of open science. So that kind of legal frameworks at national level, a regional level, or even an institutional level are very important for moving forward in favor of open science. Of course, for us, the funding is always a problem. We are always looking for funding for build local and share infrastructures. We have eventually had took part of some European projects, but we are also always looking for collaboration with the different regions. We need to develop more infrastructure in our region. And as I said, we need to change the culture in favor of the open science for the researchers to share the data, and also for their agencies and the different stakeholders to take serious this, for example, the COARA initiative or proposal in order to move the research assessment as is today to a more open and I must say a fair way for our community. So that will be all. Thank you very much. I hope it was.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lautaro. Are there any immediate questions for you from the audience or from the internet? You have one?
Yeah, there is one from Slido. Given your experience with La Referencia, what advice would you give EOSC in going forward? A simple question.
I know when to give advice to EOSC. For us, EOSC is too big, and I will be happy to receive advice from EOSC from our network. But I must say that in our experience, it was important to involve the national government agencies and institutions into the game, you know, because, for example, in some initiatives they deal with the infrastructure directly with the institutions, but for us it was very important to involve the governments in this network. This federated way of dealing with the problem, it's good for us, because at the end of the day we have national responsibilities for every country, and we have this federated infrastructure that works in our case, because we don't have the European Union to give some help with the funding and also with the legal framework.
There is another one online,
okay, yeah,
maybe.
We can have one.
From La Referencia, do you see difficulties in collaborating with EU countries linked to GDPR, for example, for sensitive data projects?
Well, it depends on the country, because, for example, in Uruguay, and even I think that in Brazil, they have similar GDP normatives, and that depends on the country. But we had some problems with that in some cases, but we managed to deal with that without, but most of the time by moving the servers. We had to move servers in some cases in order to be compliant with European normative, but we did it. So
great. Thank you. Perhaps we have to move now to our panel discussion, where, of course, you can still ask Lautaro some more questions if needed, because he's part of the panel as well. So can I get the slide about the panel, please? And this is, of course, mostly virtual panel, so it's a good question how well this will work. But I will ask first, quickly introductions from the panelists themselves, and I'll start with the order how they are in the program and not on the slide. So first one is Robert Hanisch, Director from the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Please.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody from Washington, D.C. Can you see? Oh, no, you can't see yet. An image here of a paper that I was a co-author on a little over a year ago in Science. We are actually behind many of the other national and international collaborations in building an open research commons. I don't know if you can read it here, but the highlighted text says that the U.S. is falling behind in the accessibility and connectedness of its research computing and data infrastructure, compromising competitiveness and leadership, and limiting global science that could benefit from U.S. contributions. Representing NIST on the Office of Science and Technology Policy Subcommittee on Open Science, I am co-chairing a subgroup on open science infrastructure, trying to remedy this situation and develop the governance and organizational principles to do a better job of integrating U.S. Research, computing, and data management facilities. But I look with some envy at the accomplishments of EOSC and the other international collaborations that you will hear about in this panel. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Robert. Next one on my list is Rosie Hicks as a Chief Executive Officer, Australian Research Data Commons. Please.
Good afternoon, everyone. And as Ari says, I'm Rosie Hicks. I'm the Chief Executive of the Australian Research Data Commons. We're one of the national research infrastructures for Australia. So one of about 24 funded under the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy. And our mission is to accelerate research and innovation by driving excellence in the creation, analysis, and retention of high-quality data assets. We're now doing this through a series of thematic research data commons that really seek to drive convergence for enduring research infrastructure. And we currently have 3 people looking at health and medical research data: planet, no surprises, earth and environmental sciences. And the third, I couldn't find anything beginning with P, so it's the HAS and Indigenous, the humanities, arts, social sciences and Indigenous research data commons. And thank you for having me on the panel this afternoon.
Great, thanks a lot, Rosie. Next one is Karel Luyden, who could maybe present himself shortly.
Yeah, my name is Karel Luyben and I'm the president of the EOSC Association, representing the EOSC endeavor or initiative we have here in Europe. What I would like to say, this is an initiative originally started by the European Commission, taken on board by, let's say, the countries that are involved, and taken on board by the stakeholders in those countries. Therefore, we have what we call tripartite governance system of this development, where the steering board representing the countries and the ministries in the countries, the European Commission by DG Connect and DG RTD, and the association representing the stakeholders are working together in order to build what we call EOSC, a federated system. And it's nice to hear that La Referencia already is referring to nodes and is referring to a federated network, so we can learn quite a bit from South America.
Great, thanks, Karel. Next one on my list is Lautaro Matas, but I think you introduced yourself already. If you want to, you can say something more, or is it okay?
It's okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. And then next, actually, physically here is Felipe Perez Yosto. I hope I pronounced that okay. From Digital Research Alliance of Canada.
Thank you. My name is Felipe Perez. I'm here representing what would be a really new organization in Canadian DRI. And basically, if you think of EOSC and the EuroHPC joint undertaking together, that's more or less our mandate. We're trying to coordinate all the activities related to research data management, research software, and advanced research computing under one organization. It's really not easy. We're still working with regional players, local players, but we're doing it the Canadian way, which is in a very friendly and honest way. So I'm happy to participate here, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks a lot, Felipe. And last and definitely not least is Mikiko Tanifuji, who is Deputy Director, Research Center for Open Science and Data Platform, National Institute of Informatics in Japan. Please.
Thank you, Ari. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mikiko Tanifuji from Tokyo, Japan. It is my great honor and very surprised to be involved in such very exciting and a European-wide big event as a panelist. I am represented for NII Research Data Cloud, which is the center of Japan-wide all sciences research data infrastructure team. And experiences in 3 items, which I'm not going to read out, but really my future visions is to wide data sources that we would like to guarantee for scientists, for truly science, for machine comprehensive, for optimizing research workflow, which is ongoing, developing and applying to not only research, but also private sectors for innovation. And I have been committing to the Japan government policies such as Open Science Working Group and Japan Cabinet's Office and Open Access and Academic Journal Publishing. Now, I added a comment on the Global Research Commons as a member group of RDA for GOK working group, and because I was a bit afraid if I could say it in English properly. So the point here is I always believe that we should pursue the global research commons because there are so many things and necessity to be able to share the data, qualified data. And if you are in the position to use the data for the truly science, and then you need to know who and how, and if it's valid, and if it's useful for my Python code, etc. So to at least to keep the common communications way through the commons, I definitely believe that it is a very great way to support by governments and also governmental schemes. That would be all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Mikiko, especially for also mentioning the core group, which I was planning to do, but thanks for introducing. Can we get the slide on the panelists, and then we can go on the questions then? I will start with a little bit of warm-up question. I have here questions which we have shared before, but as I said before, after this, I'm hoping to get some audience questions as well. So as we heard, these kind of research commons are being developed around the world, and we have these ones. There are several other ones being built in different places. The question, though, is that we can have these kind of meetings where we have the, let's say, the directors of these events talking how great they are, but in reality, we need to build also harmonization, in the technical level, in the policy level, and really in the pragmatic level as well. And so the question for the panelists is that what should be the vehicles for this kind of things, and who should be doing it? What's your view in the future, how we can actually build a globally interoperable commons, what Mikiko was mentioning? What would be your preferred tools for this, and do we need something new, or do we have already what we need? So please. Also, I cannot see if you use the digital hand, I was told, so if you want to talk, always raise your physical hand and not the virtual one, please. Nobody wants to take this? Okay, then I will get Philip to start.
Well, I think we need to start from the recognition that we put a lot of pressure on researchers to do a lot of different things beyond research. Research data management plans, open science, data sharing, learning how to use supercomputers, and many other different things. On top of that, we probably also expect them to know about all of the different research commons that are out there and start participating. I think that the people who are already participating are people who are vested in this ecosystem in open science. They're true voices for their community, but they potentially are not known by everybody, and they don't have the capacity to involve everybody. So I think the first thing to do is to make sure that within a discipline, a research domain, we really bring everybody on board. We make sure that everybody is aware. So there's a lot of outreach and awareness to be made. And I would say that it's people like us that need to go to the institution and present what is out there in a way that it's not something that researchers need to comply, but provide them as the opportunities that they have to make the research more impactful, more efficient. And then the other thing that I would like to emphasize is that there's a lot of research that is being done in languages other than English. So I understand that English is the lengua franca of science, but particularly in the global south, and right now I'm wearing my Mexican hat, there's a lot of research being done, really high caliber research, but with the changes that we have in our regions to have applied science, that science is often done in Spanish or Portuguese or French. So we need to make sure that whatever we do moving forward for a global research commons, it allows the integration of science that is written and made in a language other than English.
Great, thanks, Fabio. Perhaps we take next Karel, because you are just next in my line of sight here.
Well, I would prefer the others to answer, but I'd be happy to comply with what just has been said. I fully agree that there is more out there than only the English literature, for example, with respect to the science being produced. On the other hand, I have a feeling that we are moving in the right direction with all of us. There are regional initiatives, as we have just seen from various regions around the world. There is a European initiative. They are talking to each other. Today, again, we have this interaction, small interaction, but there are organizations like GORC and GOSC and OSCR that regularly, on a regular basis, talk to each other in these different regions. They will not solve it because there are just a number of people talking to each other, but at least there is contact. And you see that very similar developments are taking place at different places in the world. It is a cumbersome long-term process. And as long as we are realizing that this is a long-term process, that we have to work and keep on working in this direction, I think it will move in the right direction also to a global open science commons in the end. I tend to say if by 2040 we would have 50% of the research data as fair as possible at that moment in time, I would be very happy. But I'm talking worldwide.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to ask that. Thanks, Karel. Yes, I was just about to get to Robert, please.
Yeah, thank you. So having been very involved in the development of the federated system in astronomy, the International Virtual Observatory, I want to say that as we look toward stronger international collaboration, we need to keep the research drivers foremost in our mind. We have the technologies, we have the tools. The problems we're dealing with are more social than they are technical, but we have to keep the research problems foremost and respond to those and implement the integrating in where they have the biggest scientific or research impact. And I try to use the word research rather than science, because I think we have to make sure to embrace our colleagues who are working in the humanities and social sciences, who see science cloud as exclusive and not reaching out to them. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Robert. Perhaps next I could ask from Rosie. Do you have a comment on this?
Thanks, Ari. Took me a moment to find the mute button there. I would like to very strongly endorse Robert's comments about the need to focus on the research challenge. So that going back to your original question, do we have all the components we need? I don't think we do. I also don't think it's some of the platforms, the standards, the various things, I don't think we have them, but I think we can get them. But to do that the best way, it's by focusing on the needs of the research community. And what we are seeing in Australia is we work very, very tightly with the communities for the 3 thematic research data commons. We do see commonalities. So we do think that when we are able to address some of these challenges in a particular thematic area, the learnings can then transfer across. But we need to go into the detail for a particular research challenge to have high quality solutions. So I do think that there are different actors, the research infrastructure providers, the research communities themselves, that have critical but different roles to play in this.
Great, thanks, Rosie. Lautaro, do you have something on this?
Well, I think that here it's important to consider this model of networks. It's of networks on different levels of is a way to interact between different actors and countries at global level, because it's hard to work with all the world at the same time with there are different levels, the research level, the institutional levels, the national levels, the government. There are too many levels to interact with. So the social, for me, it's important the social interoperability problem is the problem to solve. That, of course, it involves also the language problem, the different language, the different cultures, and even the different ways to do the things in the different region. Because you will find that in Latin America there are some different research practices and ways to organize the things, or even in the US, the funding, the different kind of research cultures are sometimes hard to harmonize. So even beyond the technical aspects of the interoperability, the social interoperability, the cultural interoperability is the problem to solve if we want to build a real global research community.
Great, thanks for that comment. So as last, I would ask Mikiko to give some perspectives from your side.
Thank you. I agree to the first panelist's opinion on, and so I'd like to add another aspect on your question, that the case of Japan, that research communities and the government policy makers work together so tightly through launching research projects for data sharing necessities. So this means that the researchers do have motivation and purposes, and also they understand that how difficult it is to do them by themselves, but often they don't know how. And on the other hand, technology people know what to do and how wonderful system we can provide, and often there is a big ditch between, and takes time. And often most of the scientists say, why do I have to do this? So that to combine to all different sort of vectors of visions, even we all look at almost the same direction, I think having both sectors at least work closely together and share the issues to launch to the political approach, so that come to the research project funds to appreciate the dynamism of the data infrastructure. That's what I feel through my 8 years.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was the first round of kind of warm-up question. Do we have anybody in the audience who would like to ask our esteemed panel a question? There, please.
Thank you. I think it's a consideration and then may become a question. There are international endeavors like the GSO on global research infrastructures that can be effective again on that. In fact, the RDA, the Research Data Alliance, it's a spin-off of an early version of the GSO and has had a broad impact. Now, what I think would be important is to reach an agreement on data and metadata quality that the research communities worldwide feel comfortable in exchanging. I'm saying that because we all risk in a medium short time to be scooped by artificial intelligence methods. And if this will not be trained on good quality data, they may create more damage than advantage. But this is an important consideration, and I think on this ground, reaching, maybe again through the GSO, that will meet again after the COVID in Japan this next December, reaching a line of agreement on sharing high quality, well-documented data as a defense line for having artificial intelligence being trained safely and in a robust way.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Does anyone of the panelists want to respond to this AI, data quality, metadata quality issue? I cannot see the...
Yeah, I'll jump in, Ari, and then Rosie had her hand up too. This is really an important issue, and I wanted to endorse this, but there's A flip side to it, which I was discussing with my colleague Chaitan Baru from the National Science Foundation a few days ago, which is that we also have to expose data that does not conform with the researchers' expectations, failed data, because if we're going to train AI applications properly, it needs to know what works and what doesn't work as well. And right now, there are very few incentives for sharing failed research results, but they are going to be incredibly important if we're going to have AI that is truly trustworthy. Thank you.
Thanks. That's a very interesting insight. I understood that, Rosie, you had your hand up as well?
Thanks, Ari. That's a very interesting insight. I'm moving in a different direction. One of the things that we have focused on nationally is looking at what is this minimum standard for the metadata associated with high quality data assets. And I would make a very simple point that retrofitting metadata is nearly impossible. But it doesn't mean we don't want that data. So I think any kind of standard needs to focus on two things. The reuse of existing data and what we expect the standard to be there, but also how do we work with our colleagues in observational infrastructures to build these things at the data capture point for the future as well. So I'm just throwing up the idea that we're looking at different timestamps on the data.
Great. After working a long time with environmental research infrastructures, I do understand that very well. Does anybody else want to comment on these comments? Should we take another question?
Well, if I may,
Please.
maybe it's an idea to add to the data information on where they come from, in a sense that if the data is generated by AI itself, which we see nowadays, then we are really in trouble. So AI data should be identified as data coming from AI rather than coming from real experimental work or other sources.
Yep. That's an interesting point, although we have to then define what is then the AI, other kind of processes. You had a question there?
Yeah, there is a question on Slido for Mikiko. How did you gather and harmonize the requirements of the different communities to create one research infrastructure for all?
Sorry, I missed that. Is this the question
Yeah,
to me?
so the question is...
Sorry.
Yeah, did you get the
Right.
question?
So would you mind repeating it again for me,
Sure.
please?
How did you gather and harmonize the requirements of the different communities to create one research infrastructure for all?
Good question and hard to answer, and there is no correct single answer. That's my short answer. Because of I know that material science, case of the material science very well after past 6 years, and there is even single one harmonized solutions for the material sciences. So in science world, I think the demands-oriented and a purpose-oriented infrastructure only the way to share the concept of the sharing and the concept of, therefore, the efforts to metadata and generous to sharing somebody's effort to something else, including AI, is the essence of to start with.
Okay, great.
I hope that's the right answer to you.
Well, I don't know if it's the right answer, but it definitely is the right answer.
Appropriate. Thanks.
Any questions from the audience immediately? No? You have another one
Yeah.
on the Slido, please?
I think there is a nice one for all the panelists. How strong is the knowledge of and enthusiastic engagement in fair and open at the researcher, university, research center level?
Who dares to give their opinion on their own region on this? Okay.
Well, I guess I'll take that one too. I think the penetration of the FAIR principles, at least in the United States, is now quite deep and extensive. It is written into the grant policies of all the major funding agencies at this point, and it is encapsulated in the recent OSTP, Office of Science and Technology Policy memo, the Nelson memo, that FAIR data is really the expectation. Has it penetrated to the bench? Has it penetrated to the individual researcher? Perhaps less so. But I think the derivative is in the right direction. And it is certainly driving many of the decisions that we are making within NIST and other federal agencies to increase the fairness of data. The one caveat I would put is that I hope we don't get too far along rating fairness with a numerical scale or a grade, because I think this could actually have a negative effect of pushing data underground for fear that people will be judged badly. But otherwise, I think things are going in the right direction.
Great. Thanks, Robert. Any of the other panelists want to comment on this?
I can say that in Latin America, you know, Latin America is very unequal in different senses, even inside the countries. So the level of knowledge and adoption of the different practices and are very different, even for different disciplines. Inside the very same university, there are people and research communities that are very active, and they are working very well in all these kind of things, and other kinds of and other disciplines, or even in some countries that are resistant the idea of sharing any kind of data or even metadata about their works. So that's the challenge, to make to move the incentive in order to, because you know you need to move the incentive. If not, it's like a volunteer thing. We need to change the policies, change the legal frameworks in order to move the community to that place in a very kind way, if you want.
Great, thanks. Karel, you had a comment?
Yeah, well, I agree with the previous speaker. It is very diverse, and if you look at the institutions, some of the institutions have implemented this as a policy that really works. Some of them have a policy in writing. Some of them have support there. Others do not have the support yet. I think we should look at this as a movement which is gradually taking place. And on average, you can say that the concept of having principles like the 15 FAIR principles is a very good concept for people to think about their data, how to deal with their data, how to make them findable, accessible, ultimately interoperable, and make it possible to reuse them. So we're not there, but I'm not disappointed at all with how in 10 years' time, next year it will be 10 years ago when the FAIR principles were sort of designed. The presentation or the publication came out in 2016, but in a Lawrence workshop in Leiden, this was thought of 10 years ago. We will celebrate that, by the way, next year. And how in 10 years' time this has covered the world with respect to acceptance of the principles as such is astonishing. And then, of course, the next step is to really implement it gradually. But it means work. It means work for the researchers, ultimately, for the people that generate the data, and they need support with that. And let's say the leaders of those research organizations need to understand that and need to help with that. They have to gradually distribute their financial means in a different way. I gave the example yesterday. 50 years ago, none of the research groups would spend their money on computers because there were no computers. Now, none of the research groups ever asks whether a computer is needed or whether they can get extra money because they have to buy a laptop. This is the normal work they do. And the same thing will happen here in this way. Gradually, organizations will move into accepting that handling data properly takes attention and does a certain percentage of your budget.
Yeah, please.
Just to add super quickly, in the case of Canada, our funding agencies actually had a requirement for every university and higher education institution to develop an institutional research data management strategy. So this was even before the actual data management requirement kicked in. And so this way, institutions are really trying to think really hard, how are they going to support the researchers in adopting best practices? And so I do know that FAIR is being used quite a lot. I don't know if every researcher actually knows what that means, but they have a broader sense. So I do agree that there's advancements, but there's still a lot of work to do.
Great. Thanks for that. Any last chances to comment on this fairness issue? Okay. Then I'll look quickly in the room, and then I go to the Slido question.
Yeah, so I think I would like to challenge the panel with this question that is the most voted question on Slido, at least by 7 skeptical people in the room, that are asking if this discussion that we are having at the moment is a bit an utopic discussion, and they want to hear from the panelists if there are things that are impossible, to tell us which are those things in order to manage expectations.
Okay, so they want us to tell what we cannot tell. Or, okay. I am not sure that our panelists will take this, but maybe you can have some sort of interpretation of this question. No, everybody is being very looking at the walls. Okay, sorry, I have to apologize for the. I will not force people to answer if they don't want.
Ari?
Please? Good. Rosie.
I just want to see if I understand what the question is asking us.
Yes.
Is it asking us what are the insurmountable problems?
Yeah, I think that's, but I would like to ask if there is someone in the audience that asked for the question or voted for the question, what they wanted to know.
Yes, if you give me my more details, I can try to answer, but I'm not sure if I understand the question, Mira.
Yeah, I think that the question is really trying to ask if there are things that you have realized in your experience or in your region that are really not possible to be implemented or achieved. I think that that's...
Can I offer one comment?
Please.
In one thing that I don't think can be achieved, but nor do I believe it's the right goal. And I'm talking about the bringing data together. So within Australia, as a federation, we can expose many of the problems you have across Europe in just one country, with the challenges of moving data from state to state. But I want to flag, because it hasn't come up so far this evening, the idea of data sovereignty, and particularly in the instance of indigenous data. So we've just spent some time focusing on the FAIR principles. Here we're thinking very much about the CARE principles. So the collective benefit, authority to act, responsibility and ethics. And we are having a national conversation about what this means for our indigenous data and how we make sure that the data stays with the appropriate communities. So I think that's a particularly important thing for us to recognise what success looks like. And success looks like, and I think this comes, I had some great conversations here in Australia last week about this. When we're talking about collective benefit from the research, whose benefit? And is it the community, is it the indigenous community that needs a particular project because it's going to improve the quality of their lives, and they can tell us that project, and we have to really focus on chasing the right research questions with the right data. So that was a sort of a very winding answer to what are the insurmountable problems for us, and maybe I'm saying there are some things we shouldn't be seeking to solve because we might be asking the wrong questions.
I think that's a very good philosophical comment on here.
Can I jump in? Okay.
Oh, okay. Please.
I'll wait.
Okay, please, Miki, go first.
Thank you. Yes, I agree to Rosie, the last part. And I often these days feel that open fairness discussion is the purpose is too fair. But this is originally we're talking about pursue, assist, accelerate the science for the future towards the ecosystem future. So infrastructure doesn't come first. There is a science and the scientists work, and then infrastructure will help. But it seems to me vice versa, that the infrastructure first, and then nobody else are sort of, what are we doing behind the infrastructure? So I think we always have to bear in mind, we all bother and spend huge money and time and effort to support science. So that therefore there is a need that we have to aware of. That's, I feel, today. I may say a different thing tomorrow, but this is what I believe. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mikiko. Please.
I guess I'll build on what's been said. And in Canada, we've learned a lot from the efforts of Australia in terms of work with First Nations and Aboriginal communities. And there's a say that is nothing about us without us. And I think this applies to Indigenous communities, but it also applies to whole countries. And I think there's a lot of trust to be rebuilt between the global north and the global south for ages of colonial and extractivist science and research. And we need to make sure that whatever we build for the future, whatever global research commons, is an ethical research commons, and it's one that empowers those who are being studied, whether it's the people, the natural resources of that country. I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
Great, thanks for that comment. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, I believe, but maybe if there's any final comment from the online as well on this?
Can I? May I? Sorry.
Yeah, please.
Yes, I will be short. I think that we don't worry about impossible things because we have so much work to do on the possible thing that we still need to do. We have a lot of goals that we need to achieve, especially in our region, because we have more challenges than time and resources. So I want to have that problem of thinking of the impossible things. I really want to be there. But in the meantime, we have a lot of work to do with the possible things and the near things that we need to solve in our community in order to just get the small one and the short-term goals. So thank you.
Great. I think these were much better final words than I was planning. So thanks for, big thanks to the panelists. I think this has been a very interesting session. And from my side as well, thanks a lot, especially for the online participants. I know some of you, this is in a very inconvenient time zone, probably. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.